Not sure if the audio is going to be better or worse with the camera down here, but I'm in New Mexico, and although it's cool, the sun is strong and it's been shutting my phone off because of the heat. It is September 16th, 2023. What is it? It's 8:50 a.m. Wearing the same clothes for day number 3, but I'm going to get into a hotel today, shower and shave, clean up. I've been sleeping very well in my car that I have outfitted to, but I'm in southern New Mexico and the weather is amazing. There's these beautiful mountains with the cloud cover right over the top of them. It's picturesque. Really enjoying it. I got 197 miles to go right now to Route 77 on my way to the Grand Canyon. So I'm going to try to film at least one video a day. So I was trying to do a video this morning on scarcity within the system versus abundance outside of the system, and it just wasn't coming out right. I'll have to think about it more. Maybe it'll get attached to the end of this if I feel the mood. But as I was driving, I saw a sign, and the sign had a picture of a person wearing a mask, and it said, "Get tested, save a life." And you also see these CDC things that say the best way to fight climate change is to get boosted. And I wanted to explain why this isn't crazy from within the satanical system, from within the system of individuals who think they know better than natural order and merit-based, where they see the world as chaotic and they're carving out an organized system for themselves. And hopefully this will explain some things. So first of all, I had made a post on Twitter that got quite a bit of hate maybe a month ago now. And I basically said, if they start rolling out mask mandates, if they start another lockdown, if they tell you there's a deadly virus out there, do not simply be a contrarian. Do your own research. And I ended it with saying this would be a perfect time for an actual bioweapon to be released, and those who don't comply would get hit the hardest. I followed SARS-CoV-2 quite closely from as early as, I believe, October 2019 on Zero Hedge, and was going out with a N99 carbon mask because I thought the government had released a bioweapon and the government was telling everybody not to worry. So until I did my research, I wanted to take precautions, and I was being forced to go out. So I was taking some precautions. I don't want to get into my whole thoughts on what's going on with coronaviruses, but they've been in our ecosystem for a long time. They do mutate, but what they were talking about, what they're calling now coronavirus, supposedly is SARS-CoV-2, which was a offset of SARS-CoV. So it's pretty clear that that was made in a lab. I'm not even going to get into that. What I want to get into is economic incentives. And when things were in full effect, hospitals that had COVID patients were getting a benefit of $30K. So the incentives were to get COVID patients. And if they died, they got an additional on top of that. So the incentive was even not only to get COVID patients, but to have them be killed. And I'm not saying this in a malicious manner, like they're trying to murder people. But if you have a system in place that rewards people getting sick and rewards people even more if that sickness turns to death, fatality, then that system will continue to not change because it's not facing outward market forces. That looks pretty cool in the camera. You can see the beautiful scenery here. It's just rolling dirt mountains with a little bit of greenery and shrubbery with the hills over the top. So as things continue on and forward, they're mandating masks, and a bunch of companies start making masks and manufacturing masks. If you remember, there was a shortage up front. Same thing with hand sanitizers. Same thing with rubbing alcohol. All this stuff had shortages because it was being mandated. Like, you couldn't take an Uber ride without a mask, and then everybody was telling you to use hand sanitizer, and they were trying to sanitize everything. And as this happened, the government was printing more and more money and handing it out to these companies to help them. So a whole ecosystem was built on improper funds not facing the market but being printed from the printing press, incentivizing these groups of individuals to make those things. So when the CDC says the best way to fight climate change is get a booster, I was thinking, are they being truthful but not factual? And think about how many. So if you look at it from like an economic, ecological, environmental point of view, think about how many masks, how many surgical gloves, and how many plastic bottles of miniature hand sanitizer were misallocated at huge, huge rates, thrown in landfills, on the floor, in the trash. So just to begin, the labs that are creating these viruses and letting them escape, it's if it's not considered a full chemical weapon, a biological weapon, it's certainly a pollutant. So from an environmentalist point of view, why is there funding going into government-funded companies that are creating pollutants that, when they get released into the environment, destroy the ecosystem? So that doesn't seem very, environmental friendly. Then wearing the masks that are disposable that get thrown away, wearing the gloves that are rubber that get thrown away. How many years of masks and gloves are now in landfills that didn't need to be there, even if the virus was correct, and even if those were good ways to combat it? The mere creation of it was done via false incentives. The free market wasn't asking for that. That was a government program run by Fauci and a few others. So technically, if this was all true, just bear with me here. If the virus was random, it was an RNA strand that jumped species, which, SARS-CoV-1 was such an anomaly. The plausibility of it naturally, something that was so implausible, splitting and turning into SARS-CoV-2 so quickly is just not something you see in the study of biology. So it was so clearly everybody knew that it was engineering, not science. They're engineering these viruses. Science is what happens naturally within an ecosystem with virus creation. Social engineering is what they're doing when they're going in and they're intervening and pretending that they're natural order or God. So if all that stuff is true and the vaccine and boosters worked, then getting a booster to stop the virus so that we're not using masks and gloves and all the hospital resources would be probably better for the environment overall, because those resources could be properly allocated somewhere. So it is kind of crazy for them to word it in such a manner, but from within their system of information that they believe are facts, that's a way that you could square that circle and make it make sense. But back to being a contrarian, if there was trillions of dollars spent over the past couple of years to stop this virus, and I have another whole video, if you look over the one that I did on the New Mexican governor and firearms, and how when you move people around, the problem when you move tax chattel around is that they carry viruses. So you need to have a protocol in if you're going to start exchanging tax chattel from country to country to stop the spread of viruses. So I think this could be a test for that. But back to what I was saying, don't be a contrarian, because if there was trillions of dollars put towards quote unquote stopping the virus, but it was printed and incentivized to create more viruses and kill more people, and they've been continuing this path of funding it, they're actually funding it, and you get more funding the more the virus variants change and become deadly and hurt people. They could either purpose release a virus because they're going to make so much more money off of it, because they can run this whole thing again, but now they have all the systems in play ahead of time, so they can make a ton of profit and they know how it works. Or two, because there's so much funding for people getting sick and killed, there's natural order would take over and push back against it, so that because they're actually funding and engineering viruses that are deadly. So my argument on the Twitter was, don't just blindly disobey government, although it can be a good starting point. They're so inept and so backwards and so malicious, and they don't really know what's going on because they're not facing reality. They're running models off of models off of models, so they're bouncing. They built their house of cards on top of sand, and as it falls, they just keep building it up. And it's the only way to sweep it all aside and really work from scratch is just to run a merit-based system where you're market-facing and profit-driven, because the profit is the byproduct of meeting a market need and solving a problem. What they're getting is funding for creating and continuously creating a problem. So this next time around, benevolent people outside the system may create a second virus that is actually deadly because it's so profitable, and use it as a bioweapon to kill those who disobey. Two, because there's been so much money put into the reverse incentives of ending the virus, they would create a virus. There's what's the old Milton Friedman thing, since I'm in the desert, if you put the government in charge of the Sahara Desert, there'd be a sand shortage within 3 years. And that's basically how it is. If you put the government in charge of ending a virus that kills people, you're going to start killing people. So don't be one of those people that falls in the way. So make sure you're always doubling back and checking the facts and getting the information, and not just doing the opposite of what the government says. Because if you do what the government says, the government's in control of you. If you do the opposite of what the government says, the government is still in control of you. So if your default is just disobey everything that you hear, that person's still in control of you. And if you just do everything they say, they're in control of you. And that's where I think the missing link is. You have to have principles. You have to have understanding. You have to have research capabilities. You have to have stoicism, where you're not controlled by your emotions one way or another. And you have to look at the facts, and then you have to act accordingly. You've seen it play out once. You've seen the 2-week to flatten the curve play out once, and you reacted in a particular way. And after a couple of years, you're like, oh, I wish I would have ignored it from the beginning. And many did, if they lived in a particular area where they could do that. If you lived in a close area. Even for me, there was a time where I was being super safe when the vaccine was being rolled out, because I wasn't sure if the vaccine could be transferred. And I was like, well, do I want to start wearing gloves and washing my hand because I don't want to touch a gas pump of somebody that's just been injected with the vaccine? Did they create some sort of DNA hopping, whatever? I'm a little bit of a lunatic like that, so I've since been tested. I have natural antibodies, so I did come in touch with COVID at some point. I've had my sperm count checked. It's still in the pluses, so I'm not sure. Although maybe I got mutated one-eyed sperm that are gonna create the new communist perfect man in the future. But I guess the whole point of this is you have to be able to still see, or still aim for the truth and see the facts of reality and merit-based through all the confusion. And most of what I see online from the right and many libertarians that are right-leaning is they're obedient to the government in the fact that they're always disobedient. So it's like Manchurian Candidate N-word. So there's certain people, when you say a particular slur, they get triggered and they get angry. So it's like you have control over them. They're like, oh, I'm taking the power back of that word. It's like, no, I still have the power, because when I say it, you get angry and you want to beat me up. Sure, maybe I'll get hurt, but you're no longer in control of yourself because you've let a word control you so much. If you are in an angry spot where you don't understand the world so much that you just blindly disobey the government, then go ahead. Another example is, and I'll just say this from personal experience, so I don't really fit into a particular mold. I don't think many of us do, if we really explore who and know thyself. But in 2015, when I chose to go vegan, I got quite a bit of flack from people. So the left starts embracing you. They think you're in the politically ideologue of the left. And the right starts to brush you off. They're like, meat, eat meat, political, not eat meat, don't eat the bugs. And it's like, we can sit down and have a philosophical talk about it, but when your personality is veganism or your personality is meat, you're the same thing. The annoying vegans on the left have now been counterbalanced with the annoying meat eaters on the right. And like, it's just, to me, when, it's funny for me to watch somebody who's, they call themselves pro-life and get all fired up about the abortion issue. And then you try to talk to them about veganism or Ithel or Jainism. Many different cultures have many different ways of trying to live their life while minimizing harm to the world. They panic and they're like, no, not that. All of a sudden I'm godly and God gave me meat to eat. And then when you go to the left, they want to have abortions because it's their body. But then they won't eat or do anything that harms animals, and they're like, I'm pro-choice when it comes to abortion, but I want to force people to be vegan in many cases on the left. So they're all for violence, force, and throwing people in cages. And they don't want to eat chicken eggs because they're like, well, that chicken aborted egg or period egg. The chicken wouldn't want us to eat it even if they live on your property. But, so you can't have a consensual relationship with that. But the living creature in me, I can just kill even though it would become life because for no reason. And so they're saying that it's, so I don't know. I have a hard time squaring that. Or how people on the right are pro-life, but they go to war and they'll fight wars. So there's many inconsistency with people dig they're in. And then when I see libertarians even, and I have these discussions with them, they're dug in, and a lot of them think they're picking and choosing from, well, I pick this, and this from this side, and this, and this. So I'm pissing off both people, and that's why a lot of people, some libertarians think they're in the middle. But even in the anarcho-capitalist libertarians that think they're on the outside, and we all have propaganda, including myself, that we need to shed. But they get triggered when I say, let's have a philosophical talk about the non-aggression principle towards other life and what society would look like if we extended the non-aggression principle to animals as well, whereas peaceful animals could live in peace and known violent animals that attack you could be you could defend yourself against on a mass scale and then consume the resources thereof, or in the middle ground have a consensual relationship where you have livestock. One thing that would come to mind is how in India they have sacred cows, but the cows are treated with such dignity and respect. And then they share the milk, and the milk is given freely around town, but they're not thrown in cages and enslaved and impregnated over and over again until their uteruses fall out in order to gain the milk. So, or if you own chickens and they live in your backyard and give them shelter and protection from coyotes, and they freely go into the cage and stuff, and they're not fertilizing the eggs with a rooster, and you're eating the eggs. There's many ways for you to minimize this stuff. I'm just bringing this particular topic into this conversation because it's one of the ones where I see where I'll talk to somebody on the so-called libertarian free market, open ideas and experiences about, do people get to pick their own pronouns as an individual? And they panic and say, no. And I was like, not force you and throw you in jail, but pick them. Let's have a discussion. And they're shut off because the government's pushing pronouns. So obviously the contrarian point is that, oh, there's no validity to it, let's not do it. There's only two pronouns. There's only two genders. No discussion to go further. Similar, oh, you're vegan. Well, that's a government program because Bill Gates wants us to be vegan, but he also wants us to eat bugs, which is not vegan. And they're fried, so I can't listen to you. So meat is the contrarian move, and it pisses people off. So now, so like, you can literally target meat eaters. So this is interesting, the way that advertising works nowadays, Bud Light tried a part of this with Dylan Mullaney. But when you have targeted ads, right, at individuals on individual pages, if you know that somebody is a staunch meat eater and they're triggered by veganism and they're like, oh, I eat twice as much meat, blah, 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 and they think of it as a personality, you can target those individuals with vegan ads, which will trigger them to buy more meat. It's similar to what I was saying earlier with the government. If you're simply just disobeying the government can just create rules for the obeyers to follow and then get you to penalize yourself by just default disobeying. So there's a lot of strategies that you can be controlled by propaganda-wise if you're not actually working off of core principles, making decisions, gathering the information to the best of your ability. If you can't, find resources and individuals that you can talk to, that you do trust, that do have time to do the research, that can get you into the situations where you're working for the best information that you can. It's very, very difficult. There's certain topics. The reason I'm so into philosophy and core principles is there's certain topics when you go online to research, it's just so difficult to actually figure out what the truth is. The information is clouded, some of it's removed. I'll just give you a fun, simple example. So I just left Roswell, and for all practical purposes, most of the world believes that Roswell is where the UFO crash landed was. It actually happened about 75 miles north in an area called Corona, New Mexico, on some private land. And the researcher drove from Roswell, and it took him 3 hours by vehicle to get out to the location. There's military bases and stuff there, so there's a huge incentive to put it in Roswell, but then Roswell makes a lot of money tourist-wise from the alien thing. So they're incentivized to make money off of the tourist part. So it's kind of set up in a way that they're going to continue to attract. Now they've removed the sign that says official UFO crash thing that was in Corona. So in the future, people won't even drive by, and they'll stop thinking. Generational, as the people that die that knew where it actually was. If you go online and research it originally, most of the forums will tell you Roswell, go to the museum here. You have to go pretty deep to find out that it's in Corona. And then to get an actual location, when you get the GPS location, if you punch that into Waze or you punch it into Google, it says you can't go there. There's no direct route. So you can get a close one on a main street, and then you can walk out there with the GPS to the location. But that's been slowly scrubbed off the internet, and it's hard to find the data. There's no philosophical or no moral reason that you would need the exact location per se. It's just a fun little thing. But in a couple of generations from now, it's going to be pretty easy to think that most people are going to realize that they're going to believe it was Roswell, and that's what will go down into the folklore. And that won't be the actual truth, but all the evidence will lead to that. And looking back 100 years, when they try to figure out what happened, there's not going to be data left over for them to piece it together, and then it'll create more of a mystery because some of the information won't line up, and they'll be trying to figure out how all this false data fits together. So that's very similar to what goes on in many things. I use just the current pandemic thing and how they, you can control quite a bit of a narrative by controlling very few people if you know how they're going to react and they're going to be a reactionary. And unfortunately nowadays most people are reactionaries on all sides. So I see it within the left, the right, and the Libertarian Party and the Independent Party and individuals, that most people are reactionary. And once people realize that they're reactionary, it's a difficult path if you can get resources out of them. So like when I play poker, if you figure out who the reactionaries are on the table, they're fun to make money off of, because it's like twofold. They react poorly, they're upset, they lose, they give their money back, they get even more reactionary, they get more money, they lose it even quicker, and so on and so forth. So it's just a never-ending loop of lack of self-understanding. I don't think there's anything more that I could say on this topic. I'm 30 minutes in. I'm out in the beautiful New Mexico. I think I'll just leave you with the understanding that the best way to navigate the world is to, on the personal level, know thyself, know your triggers, know what the chemical reactions in your brain are. The ones that are negative, try to reframe them in a positive. Just a quick example, because I'm ending the video. If when you say you're getting chemical releases that make you feel anxious and anxiety, like bad things are gonna happen and you can't calculate, if you can try to reframe those into excitement and exploration and visionary, and start focusing on the same chemicals that you release that are anxious or also about excitement in what's ahead, that will help you. Similar is like if you're getting nostalgic, could be a positive thing, looking back on nostalgia, but you could get the same chemicals and feel depressed looking back at the negative. So know what your body releases for chemicals, how you interpret them, and then see if you can reinterpret them in a better way. And on a larger scale, start studying some virtues and start studying some core principles, such as something like the non-aggression principle. It's a very basic starter point that you can work from. I'd have to do a whole new video about why I'm not don't believe objectively in the non-aggression principle, but let's just say right now it's a good starting point that it's immoral to use aggression or force to get what you want. It's a defensive strategy for those who aren't moral, but everything that all the stuff that you do should be consensual and voluntary. All your interactions need to be negotiated if you want to live in a moral framework. And I shouldn't even say if you want to. The framework you live in is moral. You can choose not to live in it, but you'll quickly fall off the narrow path and things will get worse for you. If you start seeing that this is woven into the fabric and start figuring out which of these and giving them names and understanding them that are woven in, your life will go much better. And lastly, figure out some core scientific principles that you can follow to the best of your ability so that you're not becoming a reactionary. And if it's too difficult for you to figure those out, you can take lessons, courses, classes online, or find an individual that you trust that is reporting on this stuff to give you information. And then at least you know that person, and then you can try to vet what they're telling you against other sources and see what works out best. And then if you start testing some of the strategies in real life and journaling or recording how they turn out, then you can get an idea of what's best for you. So I think I'm going to end it there. What's the title of this video? Don't be a reactionary, or yeah, I guess don't be a reactionary.